Hello and welcome to Robins on the Wire, a Bristol live podcast surrounding all things Bristol City. I'm Dan Carter, the Bristol City reporter at Bristol Live, and joining me today is Jack Buchanan. Jack, how are you, mate?
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. Looking forward to the new season.
Yeah, good. Obviously, it all gets underway quite quickly. How have you found the summer? Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it's been an intriguing one, hasn't it? Obviously, you had Manning out the door, Struber in. It's a little bit of an unknown. Only one job in English football before this. Everyone's kind of a bit like, don't really know what to expect. Pre-season looks good though, so excited by it more than anything, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably the place to start, isn't it? I just want to kind of take you back to that night at Bramall Lane back in May. Were you there? Did you travel to that one?
I was.
If someone had told you what was coming this summer that day, could you have quite believed it? Because it has been a real roller coaster, hasn't it?
It was definitely a shock. I think. I don't think I was expecting Manning to leave. Definitely not. If you told me someone in that squad was going to leave after the game, I'd have gone with Jason Knight more than anyone, and he's the one that's ended up staying. So, yeah, definitely a surprise, but not convinced it's a bad thing. It's probably not what you'd have chosen to happen, but it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out, I think.
Yeah, obviously it didn't take too long for Gerhard Struber to come through the door. After it probably took longer for Manning to actually go after the link surfaced. But can you just what are your initial impressions when that announcement was made? What was your first thought when you saw him named as the new Bristol City head coach?
Well, I'd seen a couple of links, as I'm sure everyone did on social media, in kind of the week or so before, and just by chance, I've got a couple of mates who are Cologne fans, and they were intrigued by it because obviously he got let go right towards the end of their promotion winning campaign last year, and they were saying it was a bit of a hit and miss sort of run under him. He had like a sort of 2 points per game roughly with them, but down in the second Bundesliga, you'd kind of expect him to have that sort of thing with a club like Cologne. But yeah, kind of excited, I think, and more just curious as to what it would lead to, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably a feeling that's carried on through the pre-season, really, hasn't it? Because I know from my perspective, I didn't actually manage to get to many of the games, as plenty of people have pointed out to me on socials. But every time I've heard Gerhard speak or spoken to him myself, it's almost that sense of excitement and optimism, but almost because you don't know what to expect and because it's so different. Do you think that's probably fair from your point of view?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a feeling we haven't had around Ashton Gate for, well, pretty much as long as I've been supporting, to be fair. I've been going for 10, 11 years now. I've had a season ticket, and we've always had managers where we know what to expect. You know, you knew what you were getting with Cottrell, Johnson, all right, Holden less so, but fans went in the ground and stuff like that. Pearson, everyone knows what you're getting with that. Manning, we could kind of had an idea before he turned up. It was going to be nice sort of passing, possession, modern football, if you will. Whereas, it's a complete unknown, and it does feed a lot of excitement, but also a lot of kind of nervousness as to whether or not we can follow on what we did last season.
Yeah, I think those initial interviews have probably done a lot to relax the fan base. I'd say for my role, I obviously interact with quite a few supporters, and the impression I get is that every time he speaks, he's helping himself out almost. I'm sure. Did you listen to the Sound of the City interview earlier this week that he did with?
I managed to catch a couple of bits of it, and he definitely speaks quite well. I remember that was kind of the key thing I took from the first press conference he did when he was announced. I know you were surprisingly on holiday then, but yeah, it was definitely, he seems to kind of connect with the fans a lot more than Manning did. As much as he did great things on the pitch, he wasn't always the most sort of exciting manager to listen to at times, and it kind of at points probably created a bit of a disconnect. Might be a bit strong, but that feeling where fans didn't really know enough about him as a person, almost, it kind of felt like at times. Whereas Struber, it feels like he's going to give you those kind of more interesting interviews and kind of not hold back a little bit and not just do the natural PR stuff.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. He seems to just be very open. We had press conference today. I'm sure we'll touch on that in more detail later, but it didn't really feel like any topic was off the table in that chat. Anything you said, he tried to give you a reasoned and quite detailed response. I think the other main thing to touch on looking ahead to the new season is probably the transfer business. A lot more incoming business to Ashton Gate than outgoing, really, when you look at it, even if it's not been big money fees being spent all summer. I think if we just go through them one by one, Adam Randall from Plymouth Argyle, what are your thoughts on him?
He's looked good in pre-season. I was a little bit, the only 2 games I managed to watch, I went to the Valladolid game and managed to catch the Plymouth one on Argyle TV. And he looked a bit shaky going back to home park, but I guess that's kind of to be expected to some degree. You know, he had a few like pantomime boos and whatever. It's a bit of a unfamiliar surrounding, first time playing in front of any City fans. But against Valladolid, he scored, obviously took his goal really well. And he just had a very sort of solid 7 out of 10 game. You know, he didn't do anything spectacular by any means, but we all know he's a decent midfielder at this level, did well in a pretty poor Plymouth side last season. So hopefully he can kind of nail down his spot in that midfield at the start of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of drawn those comparisons with Jason Knight, hasn't it? And I think it's clear that we reinforced the club have been quite adamant that this is not a case of replacing Jason Knight before he's gone. It is someone to come in and hopefully play alongside him. But from what I've seen so far, he's just very industrious, is how I'd almost describe him. And I think when you're heading into a championship season, we know from last year just how brutal and how long they can be. And to have a player like that who you get the feeling you can almost hang your hat on most weeks. City have been quite fortunate there, haven't they? And that, you know, you've had Jason Knight for the last few years. Matty James, I think, was probably quite similar before that. It can be really helpful to have that midfielder who's just missed a 6, 7 out of 10 every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, hopefully he's going to be another one of those. It's all well and good having Joe Williams, for example, who every time he plays, you know you're going to get 110%, and you know you're 9 times out of 10 going to get a good performance. But the issue is he's probably only available 7 out of 10 games because, unfortunately, he does suffer from injury issues kind of since he arrived at the club. Less so beforehand, which is odd. But the last sort of 4 or 5 years, he's had a lot of time plagued by injuries. Whereas if we can have a Randall and a Knight available to us for 50-odd games in the season, obviously the 46 League ones and the odd cup game here and there, it is a massive boost to always know that you've got that kind of starting midfielder, first name on the team sheet, week in, week out, that's just always got to be there and always got to deliver.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think we should probably group these two together because the next signing after that was obviously Joe Lumley. It's ended up a bit of a strange one, that one, because we've obviously Max O'Leary's picked up that injury and now Radek Vitek's coming on loan from Manchester United. The messaging we had, I think it's good to be as open here as possible, is the messaging that we had after Max's injury was that the club's initial plan was very much for Joe Lumley to start the season, which makes sense considering he was signed to be a number 2. He would have been signed as injury cover. That changed during pre-season and the decision was taken that further competition was needed, which I think probably makes sense. I think most fans probably felt that was what was required. And in Vitek, they seem to have got a keeper who's quite different to what's already in the building. You know, the size of him, I think, a lot of people have pointed out. Because I was away, I've still not seen him in the flesh, but the first thing I was told by someone at the club when I asked about him was he's a giant.
Yeah, he is absolutely massive. As I'm sure you've seen, he saved the penalty against Valladolid at the weekend, and he was, you know, and keepers typically jump up and they touch the crossbar, trying to warm up for the penalty. He was jumping up and he could touch it with his elbows. He was jumping up and his hands were way above the bar. I was flipping out. This guy's massive. And I think he looks to be a really solid keeper as well. He naturally saving that penalty in front of however many were there, probably 5,000-6,000 City fans, instantly kind of endears you to the club and makes you feel at home. And he made a couple of 1 or 2 decent saves from the few chances Valladolid had. Joe Lumley, it was kind of he was very much signed to be the number 2, I think, in most fans' eyes. He wasn't, all right, yeah, it's competition for Lumley, but you probably wouldn't want him as your starting goalkeeper, with all due respect, going into a championship season where you want to try and get towards the playoffs again like we did last year. He's not kind of the go-to for me, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I think what you've got now is, I feel you've got someone ready to push Max as well. And I know that was, maybe Joe Lumley could have done that. Obviously, we've not really seen that because of the injury and then the signing of Vitek. But I think, to me at least, and you know, it's hard to really tell until he's fit, but Vitek seems like a player who could come in and give Max a real battle for the starting position. We probably won't know that till he's back, because for all we know, Max could be straight back in as soon as he's fit. But I think so many fans that I've spoken to over the last year, regardless of their thoughts on Max, have felt at least you need a keeper as good as him to push him, and at best you need an upgrade. And I guess only time will tell whether Vitek is one of these. But he's obviously highly rated at Manchester United after given he signed a new deal. I just think it feels like another positive and quite smart addition, maybe, which feels like a lot of this summer.
Yeah, 100%. We've been pretty shrewd, I think, with our business. It's been very sort of everything's made a lot of sense. Which over the past sort of 5 years or so with City, it's been a bit hit and miss with transfers. You've had complete unknowns like you and Mayulu coming in last summer, which have turned out to be okay. But I think anyone would be lying if they'd heard of Yu Hirakawa before he got linked with Bristol City. Like realistically, none of us knew who he was. Whereas Radek Vitek, some people will know who he is. I'll be honest, I know him through Football Manager rather than through being an actual player. But people like Joe Lumley, Adam Randall, Emil Riis, they're names that have rocked around the Championship the last 5 years or so and always, been pretty solid. Especially Riis, who we'll come on to in a minute, but Randall as well. It's all been very, very smart business, I think.
Yeah, I think you've brought him up there, and it'd be a mistake not to talk about him, Emil Riis, because I think he was an interesting one when he was announced. I think most fans were really positive. There may be one or two who were, I'm not sure why, a bit more pessimistic, but he's shown, albeit only in pre-season, that he's ready to hit the ground running, wouldn't you say?
Oh, 100%. I mean, what was it? 3 goals in those last 2 games. I don't know if he played in any of the ones against Bournemouth and Newport or if he hadn't quite arrived yet. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But the two times he's played in front of fans, he scored 3 goals. So naturally, everyone's going to give him a little bit more leeway going into the start of the season. If he doesn't perform, I don't think anyone's really necessarily expecting him to score at Bramall Lane, for example. But if he can nick one, excellent. He's straight onto people's radar. Everyone's going to rate him. And then after that, our kind of first few games look like he could pick up a few goals. We should pick up a few points. It's kind of the ideal start for him, and I just hope he kind of continues what he's shown in pre-season. It was a funny signing though, wasn't it? Because obviously he scored against us for Preston on the final day of the season. Didn't get given the best response by City fans when he scored that. So it was funny that he decided that was where he wanted to go. But yeah, a massive signing. I think real kind of proper classic number 9.
Yeah, I think it's the sort of signing that shows the value of finishing in the playoffs as well, because, I mean, I've not spoken to Emil Riis, I couldn't tell you if this is genuine, but you'd have to imagine, as a Preston player that day, seeing the fans pour onto the pitch and what it meant to that supporter base to get in the playoffs. You'd imagine most players would be loving to play in an atmosphere like that. And I know Ashton Gate hasn't always been like that, but when it's at its best, as it was for so much of last year, it is such an exciting place to play and watch football. The other thing I was going to point on is just the goals in pre-season. I've spoken to a couple of people who have said how important it is as a striker just to get off that mark early. It doesn't matter how you do it, who you do it against. It's just if you can get one in the back of the net early, it can really set you in motion nicely. And it does feel to me that like he's heading into this season, he should be full of confidence, shouldn't he?
Yeah, 100%. And they've all been, it's not like they've been scruffy goals. All 3 of them have been really nice, tidy finishes. Like, well, to be fair, he's just absolutely blasted it into the back of the net all 3 times. But they've been clever movement. The one against Valladolid was kind of just happened to be in the right place. The ball got played across, and it's a lovely little one touch and bang, straight into the back of the net. Similar at Plymouth, that first goal kind of with the outside of his boot into the bottom corner. It was really nice to see, and it's something that we've probably lacked is that kind of just instant decision making. Right, I'm just going to take a touch, maybe 2, and then finish it. And keepers are going to make saves throughout the season, but you'd like to think he gets probably double figures this year. You'd hope, which is something we've missed over the last couple of seasons. Just having that player with kind of consistent confidence, and you know what he's going to do.
Yeah, you definitely hope so. I think it's a proven Championship striker, isn't it? And I was looking back through like the records, and you tried to think about the last one signing that way. I mean, Chris Martin is probably the most recent one, and then you're talking about Nahki Wells before that. It's been a long time since City have gone and bought a striker from within the Championship, it feels like. And that's not to say Fally Mayulu and Sinclair Armstrong won't come good, at the time of writing or time of talking, as it probably should say. They're still Bristol City players who could be involved on Saturday. And
of course.
That might be what helps them click.
Yeah, it's always a bold move, isn't it? And they are always all right. Yeah, I think we got Chris Martin on a free, and also we've got Emil Riis on a free. But it's always got to be tricky to try and steal someone away from another Championship rival. You look at Middlesbrough last year, paying however much it was for Conway, and all right, you could argue it worked or it didn't. But the bottom line is you have to fork out a pretty solid chunk if you want to get someone who's already proven that isn't leaving at the end of the season like Riis was, because they're the most sought after position. Everybody in the Championship wants a 20-goal a season striker. Everyone in football wants that. Like it's the golden egg, isn't it? At the end of the day.
No, definitely it is. I guess then the outgoing business, I don't think we need to spend too much time on, because really it's only been Nahki Wells, which obviously that was a case of his contract expiring rather than a sale, and Marcus McGuane. I guess if we just kind of touch on Marcus mainly, were you surprised when that one came through, or do you think that was pretty much expected?
It surprised me that he dropped down to League One. I know Huddersfield have made some really, really strong signings this summer, and they look like a good outfit to kind of push back up to the Championship. I know they've signed Alfie May, obviously McGuane, and a few others that look pretty solid as well. But it was a little bit of a shock, because I thought he looked good virtually every time he stepped on the pitch last season. He was certainly a good option to have, but he might have wanted to leave and know he'll start every week, because you'd kind of assume he'll go to Huddersfield and be one of, if not their best midfielder, and get those minutes week in, week out. Hopefully, come back up to the Championship and deliver again on a consistent basis. He might have had a chat with Struber and been told he's not going to play a lot this season. We do have a lot of midfielders. It's probably the area we're strongest in this season. But yeah, it was a bit of a surprise and a bit of a shame to see him go, to be fair, after just a year. But whatever's best for him at the end of the day, I suppose.
No, I think you're spot on, and I think the point about just how many, not even how many midfielders, probably just how good the standard of midfielders are at Bristol City, because I think we'll come on to what more we think they probably need or should do this summer. But if there's one position you wouldn't be rushing to add anyone in at the moment, the central midfield, is it? Because, Jason Knight, Max Bird, Joe Williams, Adam Randall, and then by the looks of it, Adam Murphy seems to be quite close to the first team fold at the moment. There's a real blend of youth, experience, and a bite that should thrive in a Struber system there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate it looks like they're injured at the moment with Williams and Bird. But, you've got Williams, who can always provide that little bit of extra kind of that bite, like you mentioned. We saw it against West Brom, for example, last season. Maybe overplaying a little bit of a tackle to get Malumbi sent off, but it massively pays off at the end of the day. And you always need those sort of players, but realistically, we've probably got an excess of them at the moment in midfield. You probably start a midfield 5, like if you wanted to, realistically, and they're all good Championship level.
You mentioned it there. I think we've been to the press conference today, and the kind of headline news from it, I think, is the fact that both Max Bird and Joe Williams are going to miss out on Saturday's game. Obviously, the season gets underway away at Bramall Lane against Sheffield United. Quite hard to believe it's only been 3 months or so since that playoff semi-final game, but obviously the injury just kept Williams out. I believe is the same one that he picked up in the first leg of that game. Losing Max Bird was obviously a calf injury sustained, I believe, pre-season. Just from your point of view, how big a blow does it feel to be without both of them for the first game?
I think it's a massive blow, to be honest. I think one or the other you can kind of get away with, because they can both play with Knight and his role changes, rather than, they're not a direct replacement by any means. They almost couldn't be further apart as out-and-out central midfielders. Yeah. But if you put Williams next to Knight, he can carry the ball forwards a bit more, and that's fine. And if you put Bird next to him, then he does that role and Knight sits. And they both bounce off each other quite well. Even Bird and Williams as a pair themselves work really well. So to have them both out is a big hit, especially when I think some of Joe Williams' best performances last season, certainly that away leg, not the away leg of the semi, sorry, the away game at Bramall Lane back in March, I think it was. He was literally everywhere that night. It was probably the best performance I've seen him have in a City shirt, certainly up there.
100%.
And it was a huge shame to see him out.
Because that game he's probably not the sort of midfielder you think wins you games, if that makes sense. A Jason Knight can win you a game, and Max Bird can produce a moment of quality to win you a game. And I know City didn't win that night up at Bramall Lane, but I think he just come back from an injury not long before as well, or not played for a while.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't. There wasn't a big gap.
And all I can remember is just it felt like every tackle he was flying into, and obviously there was that bit of a brawl at the end, and I'm sure he was front and centre of that somewhere. I'd
imagine so.
He's probably one that I think's maybe a bit underrated by Bristol City fans. If he played for a different club, maybe it's probably the fitness thing, isn't it? Really, if he could stay fit more regularly, I think he might be spoken about on the same level as maybe not a Knight, but a Bird and even how Randall's kind of won over fans early on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we saw like a week or two ago, there were like a few rumours of him going to Stoke. I don't think they've really come to much else more than whispers, but there was a bit of an uproar on social media from City fans being like, we cannot let this guy go, because whilst he might not be fit for 46 games a season, if he's fit for 35, you've got a really, really strong, like 7, 8 out of 10 every time midfielder. And let's not downplay it. As much as he can fly into tackles, he's really, really silky on the ball as well. Like some of the assists he got last season, the one that always stands out to me, which I guess you could argue got us playoffs in the end, is that ball through to Naki Wells for his winner against Blackburn. And it was just like, even West Ham away in the cup when he played that nice, like kind of sliced volley to Conway. He has got a bit about him as well. Like when he gets on the ball, he's not just your classic kind of run through him and then play a 2-yard pass.
No, you're spot on. I think probably the best thing to go on to from that injury news is I want us to try to kind of predict the team heading into Saturday. I think, I always have the fun of doing this every week for an article, and I'll still have to do that this week. But I think if we almost go position by position as a pair of us and try to just put together not what we would like to see start, but what we think Gerhard Struber is going to go with. So if we start in goal, I'll let you kind of pick here, but I think there's probably quite an obvious choice for me.
I think it's Vitek all day long.
Yeah, I think so.
The fact he played against Valladolid straight after signing in front of all the fans at home, he didn't even get, it's not like we switched 11 at half time and Lumley came on or anything like that. He played the full 90. I think it's probably pretty clear that he's ahead of Lumley in the pecking order, possibly even ahead of O'Leary by the time that kind of rolls around. But yeah, definitely Vitek in goal.
I think you're right, and I think from what I've seen of the Valladolid game, he could be just as important in possession as out of it, because boys, he's got a hell of a kick on him, hasn't he? Like some of those kicks were ridiculous, and in this Struber team we think is going to be quite direct and quite transitional, having someone who can put their foot through it and it up to the opposition's penalty area could be a real asset. So if we go from there, I think we're pretty safe to assume it's a back three. That's basically what it's been all through pre-season. So I'll start here. We'll go left to right. My left side of centre back in the back three it was always probably likely to be, and I think it has to be, Rob Atkinson. I mean, I've been so impressed with what I've seen of him since he's come back. I was really impressed by what I saw from him at Portsmouth, and you only have to look at the reviews of Pompey fans from that loan spell. We actually spoke to Gerhard about him today, and I think the word he used to describe him was a monster in the air. And that. Firstly, that's so good to hear from an attacking sense as much as a defensive sense, given the standard of set pieces at times last year.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this season it could be a real reminder of just how good Rob Atkinson can be.
Yeah, I think we've massively missed him. And I think, I'll be honest, I think half the City fans kind of forgot about him.
Yeah.
Well, because he was out for so long. Like it was, 18 months or so. Well, it's over 2 years since we last saw him in a City shirt, and kind of 18 months without football at all for him because of his ACL and then the subsequent setbacks. He looked really good against Valladolid. He looked good against Argyle as well. I think he played in that game. He might have played against Cheltenham, but either way, kept a clean sheet. And he just looks like the Rob Atkinson of old. It doesn't look like the injuries impacted him too much. I think he's probably lucky that pace was never a massive part of his game. So, that kind of always being the key thing that an ACL can disrupt, it hasn't massively impacted him anyway. He might be slightly slower, but it wasn't like he was rapid before. So it's good to have him back. Absolutely.
And just a left footer as well. I'm definitely seen a few comments on OTIB and Twitter over the last few years of just having an actual left footer on the left side of the defence. I know Hayden Roberts and Campering have done it, but Luke Manali did so well last year as well. I'd be wrong to discredit him, but there was that need to come in on his right quite often to have somebody able to pick up that ball and drive from that side. I think could be a real asset again in a team that we're expecting to be quite transitional.
Yeah. And I think it speeds you up as well. Like we've seen kind of so far in the pre-season, Struber's got a real emphasis on as soon as we get the ball, move it on. Manning was very much a lot of side to side, wait for the opening, which obviously also has its benefits, but it can be quite dull to watch. Whereas if we're getting the ball and just going, right, bang, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all of a sudden, like Scott Twine's got it on the left wing, it's a lot more direct, like you're saying. It's a lot quicker, and having Atkinson there to instantly get the ball out to whoever's playing at left wing back or into Knight or Randall or whoever in midfield. It's just a lot sharper and kind of quicker than McNally, for example, having to shift onto his right and then play it. You're allowing a bit more pressure onto yourself.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. The one that always stands out to me is I remember game against Preston. I think it was in his first season, around September time. So I think Nigel Pearson was in charge for his first season. Mm-hmm. And I remember him picking up the ball around the halfway line, driving to the edge of the box and trying to up with like a 30-yard strike. It got nowhere. I don't think it was close, didn't go in, but
yeah,
he has that ability almost the Adam Webster sort of wandering into midfield sort of ability. Next to him, obviously, it's a really weird one, isn't it? Because City seem to have loads of options at centre half.
We do.
And none of them, other than Vyner and Atkinson, are actually available for this game with Rob Dickie suspended.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So, would you be in agreement that it will probably be Zak Vyner in the middle of the back three?
Yeah, I think it's probably Vyner and Tanner realistically next to Atkinson. Like you say, Dickie's probably first choice alongside Vyner to go in that back three, but because of his suspension. Because am I right in saying the red card was a 1-game offence, but then because it was his second
of the season,
red of the season, it gets extended.
I think the XL Robin shared something on Twitter about how strange can it be that a player got sent off will serve his entire ban against the team he got sent off against.
Yeah, it's quite impressive.
Got sent off against Sheffield United earlier in the same season. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely madness. But I'd guess definitely Vyner in the middle, and then you kind of have to put Tanner on the right-hand side because then it allows him that bit more license to come out wide kind of and defend where needed. Yeah,
I think so. I think there's a couple of points I want to touch on there because you mentioned Joe Williams having a really good game at Bramall Lane. The league game up there was I think it's probably one of the best games I've seen George Tanner play it as a right-sided centre-half. I remember him being hard as nails through the game. I'm pretty sure it's the same game he fractured his leg in, or whatever the injury he got. I think it was a fracture or a break, and it was in about the first half or something, and he played the whole game.
Yeah.
And there's that photo of Mark Sykes stood on the advertising hoarding, and George Tanner's right next to him. He did not stop running. Yeah. So I do think as a part of a back three, sometimes he's almost looked better than he has done as a right back or a wing back. The other point 100%. I wanted to touch on was there were obviously reports the other week, initially from Sky Sports, that City rejected a bid in the region of £1 million for Zak Vyner. As far as we know from our end, that is the case. There was a bid rejected. It fell, I think, fairly short of City's valuation. Where do you stand on him heading into this season? Because obviously he's entering the last year of his deal. There has been talk of plenty of interest. I think we reported earlier this summer that there was interest from Europe. Where do you kind of stand on him and his future?
I'd love to see him put pen to paper for a new deal. I feel like he played it was hard to tell last season if he wasn't playing as well as he has done the 2 years before, or if it was where the general level of our team had raised, so he didn't have to do as much sometimes. Because, you look at the 2 years before and there were lots of last-ditch tackles, sliding tackles, which make a defender look incredible, but also make you realise that probably 2 or 3 errors from other players, and possibly him at times as well, have led to that. Whereas last year there was a lot less of that, but we just looked a lot more solid in general. So whether or not he's past that point of, like you say, going into that last year of his contract, we're not going to get as much money for him now as we would have done 18 months ago, let's say. Because everyone knows where they can just wait a year and potentially get him on a free.
Yeah.
But if he can, or if he's willing to sign a new deal, you'd like to hope he'd certainly be willing to talk. He's always been here. It's where he's grown up, as far as I'm aware, and kind of always played for City. You'd hope that he's interested in that, and I'd love to see it happen if he is. Yeah, I think for me, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think my attitude with Zak Vyner is it probably costs a lot more to replace a Zak Vyner and get the same level than it would to keep Zak Vyner. Be interested to see how that one plays out. Obviously, we've still got just under a month left of the transfer window, so there's still plenty of time for things to happen, plenty of moving parts. We'll hop into midfield then next. For me, I don't even think we really need to debate this one much now that we've discussed the injury news. It's going to be a 2 in midfield is what we've seen in pre-season, and I can't see anyone other than Jason Knight and Adam Randall starting. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's definitely got to be those two. I think, like we've already touched on. Bird's out, Williams is out. It does kind of then just come down to those two, and it'll be interesting to see how well they can play. They looked good together in the preseason friendlies, but you need them both to be on their A game because they are quite similar. We don't really have that kind of ball carrying midfielder like Bird. You're going to have to rely on Twine or Mehmeti or Sykes or even Hirakawa, who's probably going to be playing out at left wing back based on what we've seen so far, to drive us up a little bit further, perhaps at times. But if they can both be on their A game, then I think there'll be times when Sheffield United will struggle to break through that midfield line.
Yeah, I think you're probably spot on. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's kind of hard to predict how they're going to play, even because of their change of manager. But it's a bit of a cliche that games like one of them lost in the middle of the park. But I think with that pairing, you'd be quite confident that they're not going to give United's midfielder easy night of it, are they? That's
No.
the guarantee. You mentioned Hirakawa then at left wing back. Is that who you reckon will start on Saturday?
I would guess so, because obviously it looks like he doesn't fancy Roberts, or it looks like Roberts might be on the way out, depending on various things that have been read recently. I've heard a couple of links to Stockport and Plymouth as well, which would be interesting. The main thing I've sort of read was that he wants to leave to get game time. I don't know how true that is, or if you've heard anything on it.
I think it's a hard one to kind of judge, isn't it? We know there's been interest from Stockport. That's not come to fruition yet, but like I said, there's still a lot of time left in the window, and quite often once games start going up, that's when moving parts happen. Look, I think it's hard to tell, isn't it? I think that from what we've seen in pre-season, it doesn't seem like he's going to be a consistent starter.
No.
But equally, that was the case at the start of last season, and he ended up playing 30-odd games. Without any, this is an insight, this is gut feeling, you'd imagine he's one that could possibly move on in the next month. Partly because of the game time side of things, maybe he's not going to get much, and partly because does he have a natural position in a Struber team? Because he's not always looked as comfortable at wing back. Does he have a natural position there? I'm not so sure. If he's at left wing back, does he get in ahead of Atkinson, Jamie Knight-Labelle now, Luke McNally, Zak Vyner, Rob Dick? There's quite a lot back there. My pick for left wing back is I wonder if we might see Ross McCrory hop back over to that side and Mark Sykes on the right.
Yeah.
Just because I think Sykes probably offers you a bit more defensively than you still on that wing back. And I'd worry, not that I doubt you in that role, because Gerhard even today sung his praises and said from the conversations he has that you feels comfortable in that position. But just my gut feeling is that Sykes probably is a bit more of a guarantee of exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think as much as I love you as well, like he is an absolute workhorse. Like I don't think I've seen him stop running on a City pitch yet. But he's not the most physical player, and Mark Sykes just has that little bit more about him that if whoever Sheffield United are going to play on the wing on the day is trying to get round him, then you've got a bit more of a tough tackler if needed. All right, he's not going to be the best defensively. He's not Cafu or anything like that. But if he can fly into a tackle a little bit harder, it might be what we need at Bramall Lane, perhaps. And we all know Ross McCrory looked good at left back towards the back end of last season. He was absolutely tearing it up there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was quality. Well, I think Liam said at one point he felt he was playing better as a left wing back than he was a right. So
yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? Because from a point of view, playing someone out of position when you don't have to kind of seems a bit bizarre. But equally, if you get as much out of him out there, it could be just as effective. And I think it brings us onto the 10s quite nicely, because if you had Ross McCrory coming in at that back post, like we've seen so many times now, goal after goal, when he's charging in, bar elbows out, getting through everyone.
Yeah, well, he scored one on Saturday against Valladolid, just like that.
Exactly, he's got this knack, and I wonder if he's doing that. To me, Anis Mehmeti feels like a good fit as that left-sided 10. Room to drift out to the left, get spaced in from the left, get the ball into the box, because he's been a real bright spark in pre-season, hasn't he? He
has, and he has looked probably the best he's looked in a City shirt, or certainly the most consistent. But my issue with Anis Mehmeti, as much as I think he's an excellent footballer, is he is quite predictable for defenders. And I think as you go through the season, people will just continue to realise that he won't go out on the outside. He might swing the odd ball in, but his MO typically is get the ball drive from wherever he's picked it up until about sort of 15 to 20 yards out, and then he'll try and shift inside before he plays it across or shoots. Yeah. And I think you eventually run out of options with him because like he scored a lot of goals last season. He scored sort of 11, 12 in the end. A few penalties, yeah, we'll give him that. Obviously, you have to score them still. But the second half of the season, he really went off the boil. And I know he played a bit less, but it was noticeable when he did play that certain defenders in certain games were starting to clock on to, if you can nullify him from coming inside, if you can double up on him or whatever out on the wing, then you can effectively take him out the game.
Yeah, I think I've written it time and time again. Anis Mehmeti, for me, is most threatening when he's playing on instinct. There was a couple of games last season where it was like he wasn't even thinking. He was just playing cruise control, and it was so good to watch. And it was almost when he had too much time on the ball and was taking a bit too much time that we didn't see the best of him. And it's something Liam spoke to us about. I think it's something he's even addressed with us before. So he knows it's a part of his game that he probably needs to work on. What I would say is he still feels like the kind of player that's going to, in a game like Saturdays where, most people are expecting Sheffield United to be on top, he's the sort of player that can create you something out of nothing with a ball in or a shot, isn't he?
Yeah, 100%. And the good thing about him cutting inside is a lot of those times he gets those shots away almost to the far post, and they're not easy for keepers to save. So if they don't go in, as long as they're on target, you often do get the rebound and someone can poke it home or if Emil Riis is knocking around in the box, there's no reason why he can't just stab it in like when required. And like you say, he can have that moment of magic in him, as can a few of our players. You've got Twine, Sykes, even Hirakawa here and there has kind of picked up something from nothing and swung a ball in, and it's ended up being exactly what you need. But yeah, definitely when playing on instinct seems to be a lot better. Stoke at home last year was one of the standouts for me, where he scored those 2 goals, the penalty, and then that absolute rocket from the corner on the volley. And like you say, when he has too much time, I think I would assume anyway, just kind of overthinks it and make the decision at the right point. It'll be a big season for him because he's going into the last year of his contract as well. You feel it's kind of make or break for him.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I do agree. I think then we'll kind of wrap up with the last 2 quite quickly as I'm aware of the time and we want to get a couple of other bits in. Would you think it's going to be the same sort of second 10 and Emil Riis that we saw, Scott Twine and Riis? For me,
I would guess so.
Yeah, I think so. I think from my point of view, I understand why people were crying out for 2 strikers, but I think probably up there, having Scott Twine to, even if it is a case of to buy a bit of time with him, drawing fouls or free kicks and corners, especially now that you've got big players that might be able to get on the end of free kicks and corners.
Yeah.
I'd be quite keen to see him start. And I think it's a really big season for Scott Twine. I think it's quite clear that he was someone Liam Manning was very keen to bring to the football club. Obviously, Liam's left. And he's got a new manager now to come in and really stamp his show. I think he's got to kind of show what he can bring to a Gerhard Struber team. And so far in pre-season, it seems like he's done quite well to adapt from what I've seen.
Yeah, 100%. And the one big thing I noticed against Dargar and against Valladolid as well is he seems to be doing a lot more off the ball with this Struber team. And it feels like under Struber, you're going to get away with not running a lot less than you could under Manning, because Manning was much more, we'll have the ball and we'll do our thing with it when we don't have it. Don't panic too much. Whereas Struber seems to be a lot about, right, we've lost the ball, get it back as soon as you can, and then do your thing. And he certainly seems to be running a bit harder, and that's maybe where he's got a point to prove to a new manager, I don't know. But hopefully we see a little bit more kind of input from him off the ball, win it back high up, and then if he wins it back on the edge of the box, there's nothing stopping him 2 touches out his feet and having a dig. We all know that's where he's at his most dangerous. So I'd love to see him continue that.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to talk about the striker, because I think if it's one up top, we both know. I think that kind of brings us on to where I kind of want to wrap up this first edition of the new season. There's kind of a few predictions, bit of chat about the remainder of the window. So I think probably the first point from my point of view is the remainder of the transfer window. Gerhard's told us today that they are very much open. There's nothing imminent. He doesn't feel there's any need to rush things either. But it's a case of they'd like to get another one in, maybe another 2 if they could. If you could only get one more addition in, Jack, from your point of view, what would you be looking to strengthen this summer?
I'd probably go with a left back or left wing back, whatever you want to say, because we know Spring's out until sort of late September, October sort of time. So yeah, probably some cover there. Obviously, if Hayden Roberts goes, it's a must for me. Because at the moment we look fairly weak in that area, even with him here. So if he goes, you absolutely need to bring in someone, certainly of his quality. If not, try and push it up a notch where you can. But that will be the go-to for me.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think there'll obviously always be supporters pining for another 9. I think Gerhard said in his interview with the BBC the other day that, to be quite honest, they're open to another 9. You'd imagine for that to happen, someone's going to have to go out the door, and I wouldn't rule that out. I think, Fally's not played loads in pre-season.
No.
Harry Cornick hasn't played loads, and we kind of know that what his situation has been over the last few seasons. I think Sam Bell's an interesting one because he's heading into the last year of his contract. You probably can't rule out him leaving. Do you know what I mean? There's scope that one of those 3 could leave. I think maybe if 1 or 2 of them did, a 9 would become a possibility.
Yeah.
But my point of view, the left back's the one where you almost have to find a way to do that. I think the only question is going to be is, do you take the risk of doing it before anyone leaves and potentially ending up in a similar situation you did to last summer where you've got more players than you bargained for? Or do you take the gamble of potentially having to go a week with only Ross and Elijah, let's say, or Ross and Hayden as your 2 left backs because Elijah's gone out on loan or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Do they take the risk of being slightly short just to make sure then don't overspend?
Yeah, it is kind of a double-edged sword to some degree, isn't it? Because you don't want to end up in that position where you've got more players than you can register or you've spent too much or anything like that. But equally, you don't want to sell yourself short if Hayden Roberts goes to Stockport on the 28th of August and all of a sudden you've got 2-3 days to scramble for a replacement, then you're leaving yourself in a very sticky situation then as well. So it's trying to find that balance of maybe if you think he's going, start looking then and hope that you can bring someone in kind of as he leaves almost to try and kind of balance the 2.
Yeah, I always think of the Adam Webster one. I'm sure you remember that. Well, I think he left the day before. Was it Leeds that season? Yeah,
it was. Yeah, because he'd played all of pre-season, hadn't he? Yeah. Like against Forest Green and everything, and then literally the night before we played Leeds, he was gone, and we had gone,
and you end up in a position where whatever you're thinking of him, you end up signing Ashley Williams as your first choice centre back, and I think there's examples of it working as well. I think Joe Bryan played the first game of the season the year Jay Da Silva signed.
He did,
so you can it can work. Codger played with Tam Abraham for a bit. I think what fans from my perspective should probably remember is at this stage last year, City played that first game. They didn't have George Earthy. They didn't have Scott Twine. They played Luke McNally.
Yeah.
No, they didn't have Luke McNally. Sorry, those 3 weren't in the building for that whole game, and were all there before the end of the window. From my point of view, I think these games will give probably Gerhard a bit of a better idea. He'll have had his thoughts in pre-season because he's got to see him in action, but competitive games will probably be the true test of whether or not certain players are up and able to play in his system. So I wouldn't be surprised if, especially because we've got a 3-game week coming up, with Charlton, MK, and Sheffield United. It's a really congested week where things could happen. I think probably the next kind of point to move on to is predictions for City this season. I've had to do some for a lovely journalist roundup we've done for the Championship, and to be quite honest, I reckon I could be wrong with every single one of them. But I think the main one from a City perspective is, where do you think City will finish this season, and what do you think would represent success?
I think success would be a top half finish. I think, or top 10 finish, let's say. A little bit less vague. I think if we can be in and around that playoff mix again, I'd be more than happy with that. I think where we will finish is probably somewhere from 13th to 9th. I think we'll be sort of firmly entrenched in mid-table. I don't think we'll have any sort of worries about dropping into the bottom half, particularly. But I also don't think we're going to I don't think we're going to be in the same position we were in last season. I think we'll be quite similar. You know how Watford last season were always kind of like 5 or 6 points outside the playoffs, but never really looked to threaten anyone. Yeah. I think we'll be in that sort of role, and I'd be quite happy with that this season.
No, I think I've put down 9th as my prediction for much of the same reason as you. I don't think that would be a negative season. I think most people seem to expect the Championship to be stronger this season. And with a change in manager, there's always a bit of a period of adaptation. That's the other thing I'd say is I wouldn't be worried if things don't look perfect on Saturday, because it's not this. You got to remember, this is a team that beat City 6-0 on aggregate last year in the playoffs, and City have changed their manager since. It is going to take some time to get used to. I guess we'll kind of do. I think we should probably do the awards one as well to wrap up on that. So if we kind of say, if you had to have a better player of the season today, who would you go for?
I'd say it's probably going to be Jason Knight, realistically. But let's go with a rogue shout. I'm going to throw, as much as I may not have looked like I would about 5 minutes ago, I'm going to go with Anis Mehmeti. I think if he can get going this year, from what we've seen in pre-season, he could be incredible. And I really hope so, because I love him, but sometimes he frustrates me.
No, I think that's fair enough. I think he's a decent shout. My outside pick was, again, I think if Jason Knight's here all season, there's a very good chance it's him again. But I feel like my one to watch is almost Ross McCrory. I think we mentioned it earlier. We had that hint the back end of last season and during pre-season at just how good he can be. And I think if he can stay fit all season, he can send a real reminder of just why Bristol City was so desperate to bring him to Ashton Gate.
100%. He was sensational in that kind of March to May run that we had that really got us into that playoff position in the end. He was just incredible. It was like every other game he was coming in around the back post and nodding one in, or there were a few tidy finishes in there as well, to be fair. It wasn't just the old header at the back post. Like there were some decent goals. But yeah, I think that's a good shout. Good shout.
Yeah, so final one then. We won't do young player of the season, but I think we might want to revisit these once the window's done. Might be the best way of doing it.
Quite possibly.
We're heading into the first weekend of the Championship. As we've mentioned, Sheffield United away. If you had to predict the score right now, I'm putting you on the spot. I've not briefed you. What do you reckon is going to happen?
We're going to draw 1-1 and Emil Riis will score.
I'd take that quite happily.
I'd take that all day long.
Exactly. Right, well, I think that pretty much wraps us up for the first episode of this new edition of Robins on the Wire. Like I said, it's a new Bristol Live podcast. Our hope is that we can bring these to you once a week. Normally, I think reviewing a game, our hope is Mondays where possible. That might be a bit different next week because obviously it's a double game week. So I think our hope is after the Charlton game, we'll have a bit of a roundup of the two. But yeah, we're really excited to be bringing this to you. It's something we've been working hard on in the background, and hopefully we're going to grow it as the season goes on. We'd love to do some interviews with former players, some maybe in studio editions. That's our hope. So any way you can share the podcast would be greatly appreciated. We're hopeful of growing it. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify, so you don't always have to look at us if you don't want to. But yeah,
we're beautiful. We're beautiful.
Exactly. I'm sure everyone will be flocking to YouTube, but no, really appreciate anyone who's listened this far, and we should be back with you next week for a bit of a review of the first 2 games of the season.